Well, hi everyone. Thank you for this opportunity, Andy and team. I'm looking forward to share a little bit about our journey that has been going on for more than 20 years. This is not something that you do in a day or two. But I'm also going to challenge you in some respects about your thinking, because that's what we did. We started to look at, what are some of the fundamentals we need to have a look at. So let me start off. When we look at, Baruch Levy and many others that look at, what are, the businesses that we are in today. And as Winston Churchill said, we're looking at the empires of the future, and this is what we're building today. And it's in the mind, and it's in the mind where we look at differences of, what is going on in our world. But the other imperative is also, I look at, the rate of change. And even if I build something beautiful today, I would not be able to adapt quickly enough by looking at the same way, in business and how we look at business today. So we had to fundamentally go back and see, how do we look at this and how do we look at this different? When we look at, just the context of the world, there's so many changes taking place. Now I look at the three vectors that we've got here. And it's looking at technology. It is looking at, just society, the behaviors. It's also looking at, just industry. And, if I combine all of the components that I see there, it is not very often that you see the convergence of all three vectors coming together. But that's the disruptive world that we're sitting in today. The military in the US has got a term that they call the VUCA. That means disruptive, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And that for me is really describing the world that we're in. I listened yesterday to some of the comments of some of the people on, changing regulation, changing requirements in the reporting. That's the world that we live in. And we can't change the world and consolidate and make it easy. It's changing whether we like it or not. But that is really the environment that we're sitting in. So when we look at that, and I need to look at how do I adapt and how do I actually find ways of accommodating but also thriving in this setup, I need to have a different mindset. I need to look at how the world looks at, the value that I'm creating, but I also need to think about how do I embrace this. And why I like this picture, because you see the different emotions from the different people. Some of the people don't know what's going on. Some of the people are actually looking forward to that. Some of the people are so fearful they don't know what are they facing, and some people are just looking the other way. And that's what we're facing as well in the world, how people react to this environment. I don't want to do AI. I don't want to change. That's you can't not look at the facts. So when I also look at the different way that the setup, it means that I need to start looking at it from a number of perspectives. If I look at, for instance, trees, they grow down below, gravitropic, but they're also growing at the top. And it's very similar for us as human beings. You need to grow internally, you need to build the character, you need to build the competencies and the skills before I can actually talk about it. But it's also the same with companies. I need to build the capacity to deliver and be able to adapt before I can actually, go and talk on the other side and say, this is how great I am and this is what I'm doing. So it's fundamentally the right approach of how I grow. Now, we are not a big company, but we're doing big things. And the way we've actually looked at this is, how do I actually create the capability with the best of the best working with us? And that's why we created an orchestra of beauty. And that beauty is getting the right partners aligned to work with us and bring their expertise so that we all can deliver and be successful together. because that's the only mindset. I cannot be today the best in everything. Even if I'm the biggest company in the world, I cannot be. Because the rate of change is too big for me to be able to do that. So that's why, I like to be the conductor of the orchestra. What we also see is one of the other key factors is that you sit with, many silos. People are working in silos and they don't have the ability to integrate. So our biggest skill is how do we integrate the combination and make beautiful music. So I like this, but it means, again to the previous slide, I need to take stock of where I am. I need to be very clear of what I am and what I'm not and where I need to grow so that I can adapt and change in those areas. And then really liking, making beautiful music. So that's, and I can't hear the sound, so I assume, there it comes. Isn't that what we want to do in business? Take the little pieces, take the people working together, working with our partners in the end and say, this is how we're going to do this. And it's nice to do that in one piece of music. The difference is, every day, every week, we've got a different piece of music coming at us. So we're not doing one symphony anymore. We're actually doing a medley. And we need to be able to change every now and then because there's a different way to look at this. What is quite important for us is our value system. Ownership, leadership, stewardship, and doing that with excellence. Owning the challenges and opportunities that we're facing, then looking at, what is the leadership that I need to show as a person, as a team, as a company. And that is starting looking at, have the courage and the intentionality to plan and do and say, this is what the vision of the future look like. And that's how we're going to approach that. But then also to be the good stewards, what we've received, the opportunity that we have. So I can look at this environment, that disruptive environment that we're sitting in, and I can say it's either a challenge or I can look at it as an opportunity and say, what do I do with that? How do I then be a good steward of what I'm doing? And so many times you all seen it. Why don't I just do it right the first time with excellence? I don't want to do it again and again. I allow myself to make mistakes, but then I can move forward and work through that step by step. Now, to react to this, we actually build up a strategy map of looking at the number of combinations. On the one side is a growth strategy, and doing that as fast as we can, looking at speed to market, and that's why we started utilizing the technology and tools, whether it's replication. On the other side, we're also looking at the productivity and efficiency, and how do we actually accommodate the ongoing process of reducing the different timelines. But we've also expanded what you see from the different strategy maps to say, but I need to know what is going on in the environment, in the industry. I also need to look at what is going on with my competitors so that I've got all that information available so that I then can see how do I grow in that environment, how do I actually do the optimization. But then the internal side of this is, deliver to my customers, what they want, when they want, and how they want it. But that is only possible if I go and look at a delivery framework of how to deliver what I'm doing. So now the internal side is, from the bottom down. How do I look at my in delivery framework? Look at the different components, the strategies, the methodologies, the way we look at systems, people, and the partnerships. And then combining them, aligning them so that I can make beautiful music. And then on the other end, I need the partners and see that they deliver. And then also the right people. So now I'm looking at the competency profiles of what we do and how we do that. So what is the competencies of the future that I need in the specific components in the specific areas? So quite an extensive framework, but it's very integrative in nature so that I can be able to accommodate, the changes in the market and align everyone to deliver one goal. So I'm going to give you an example, just to bring it base. If I want to buy a house, I'm looking at, level 1, and I'm already I'm building a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet has got an input sheet where I can change all the terms, the prices, the rates, the insurance, and everything on that. So, looks very nice. My wife is impressed. She look at all of this and see, I know what's going on. But then I take it to the next step and say, but can I utilize the AI tools to start doing predictions for me? What is the future interest rates going to look like? What will influence gas prices, power, and so forth. So now I'm building already a next level of capability. But that's still constrained because I'm utilizing the same formulas and the same thinking. What if I take it to the next level where I take away the constraints? I've got the data available, I consolidate it, but now I don't know what it looks like. If I can then run this in a way that I can understand, what are the future prices going to look like, but what is the maintenance requirements of my house going to be? How can I then start accommodating, how do I look at interest rates, whether it's now pricing or weather patterns, or let's start looking at steel prices, import duties, so that I can determine where in what area do I, for instance, add value. Do I put on a new roof? Do I look at the tax benefits by doing that? So the complexity is immediately, going to the next level, but that's the type of thinking that I should have. Now it is beyond my comprehension of how do I do this, but now I can create the tool and the setup that I can go and have a look and say, good, I can take this forward by building the relationship models in AI to be able to do that for me and then consolidate the data. So there's a few requirements. I need to have access to the data, and I'll talk about that a little bit. So what are the key enablers? Looking at this from the perspective, and I'm going to look at the bottom, is really our data centrality. So it was key for us to look at, say, the data centrality should be available, I should own it, and I should have the ability to actually do the relationships. So now I can actually understand the data. I can, you can have all the fancy words of, taxonomy, ontology, hierarchy. How do I set it up in a way that makes sense that I can actually pull the data, but it's already setting up, the key information. But the data ownership is key. It shouldn't be entrenched in systems where I can't get access to that. Then looking at the process environment, how do I do the orchestration of the processes between the different departments, integrate that? How do we set this up? How do we make sure that I can actually deliver? And that's part of my delivery framework. So it's not just the processes itself, but it's also the policies, the procedure, the skills, the competencies, and the people. And then, I take to the next level of what do we look at in integrated frameworks. So I'm going to talk about the end in mind as well. We've got the opportunity to build a business without any restrictions. We don't need to go back to, we've got legacy systems, legacy set up. So now I can say, I don't have the constraints of a legacy environment. What is the best way for me to look at that? Now I could have gone to and say, let's look at, some of the systems out available. But on the one side, it's constraining about data, fundamentals. What do I need in the fundamental setup here? So I'm going to talk a little bit about a systemic organization where you can do adaptive and look at data and then adapt to the environment. And that's a fundamental premise of how we've set up the business model so that you can then adapt. But I then need all the enablers to it. You'll also see, I talk a little bit there about in the framework, whether a static environment or a dynamic environment. You need the dynamic environment to actually be able to say, this is the way it is, because the environment changes over time so quickly, and I need to have the ability to adapt, in that environment, and also then predict, because now I can start looking at the patterns. Now, I'm going to make it simple. We build gas to liquids. So one of my biggest input, is really the price of gas. But I've got options for 3 types of sourcing. Which one is the better one? The one has got higher methane content, the other's got a lower price, and I need to combine and optimize that. The one is different, prices for transport, and by doing that, I can start optimizing on that. But now I need to factor in different components, like whether it is tax or levies or other components. So now in this framework and the environment that we've set up, we started looking at the end. How do we want to run the business? How do we want to run the operations? And then made conscious decisions of how we want to set up. It took us, almost a decade to look at the operational side, the frameworks, predictive maintenance, planning, simulation models, reliability models. How do we set it up so that it can work in that environment? And now it doesn't want to move forward. Thank you. So we've broken it down to really 3 pillars. On the one side, you're looking at a smart manufacturing. And, I've heard some of the conversations about the type of, building. So looking at all the sensors, how can I establish and get the information? How do I set it up? How do I transfer it from just data to information? And then we started building on top of that, integrated operations framework that will dictate and give us the ability to run the different models, whether it's models for the operation, whether it's models for the reliability, it's models for, how do I look at my supply chain, simulation models and make that part of my framework, how do we do the heat and mass balances and operate the facility to optimum. And then enabling using tools like APL, state-based control, but then build that as part of the structure and setup with the whole intention from day one. How do we make this running of the facility optimized? Then we started building on top of that based on fundamental models and not just AI data, because you need to understand the fundamentals of how you want to run that. And in doing that, we built up a structure where we've got a value optimizer that is sitting on top of your APCs so that I can optimize the running of the facility. And that will take in consideration availability. How do I look at reliability? How do I look at the buffer capacities, the optimization, and then, differentiate and integrate that into what the clients are looking for in the customer products? Do they need 3 centistoke, 4 centistoke, 8 centistoke, base wells? So that is the one side of it. But I also create the hooks that I can then look at the business side. And the integration of the operations and the business was key, because now I can look at the business side and do the same with the models there. I've got the framework. It's an adaptive business. I can then look at my input from a commercial perspective, but I can also look at transfer pricing, the tax models, the different interactions between my sourcing, execution, logistics costs. So now, by building a smart integration between the two, I'm optimizing on the business. Further, I looked at the standard ERP that can optimize on how we do this and how we can relate to cost factors, functional support, and other areas. But it is still looking at data centrality. Even to talk to the ERP vendors and say, you need to change your thinking. To get this integration going was not an easy task. I can tell you, as we go through the process, the first step that we did was, start understanding the business. So I would know the people and say, $14 million a day loss if we don't do it this way. $60 million loss if I don't do the integrative approach or the ability to replicate. So now by building the integration into the framework, and today, we're already running the models. I can today tell you whether current market prices, am I making money, yes or no? But that's now building fundamentals, plus then the AI, and then the relationships, and combine the two. So I'm not getting a lot of hallucinations and running away. So there's fundamental premise in how we looked at. The systems was also integrated in, from data centrality principles at the bottom. And the adaption is there's, giving me the ability to take one piece of equipment, and on that piece of equipment, I can understand the engineering data, maintenance data, procurement data, tax codes, and then, mean time to failures, mean time between failures of one piece of equipment. Again, so it's data centrality, but it's also looking at equipment centrality in that sense. And then do the orchestration outside of just putting it in a big system. Because the minute you start changing the system, you've got something that is so huge that I can't update it. So make sure that I own, those interfaces as well. And then we started looking at this from a replication. We tested some of the ways to replicate. We're using AI to replicate drawings and processes and everything else. And I can say this, instead of doing it in 14 months, 16 months, 18 months, we've tested it and it's coming to weeks. That's the difference. But it takes us to the step where we can say, this is how we set it up. This is how we, going to look at it in future and then, implement this. So now I've got also the opportunity to optimize, have a central control center so that we can support, but there's also local support in doing what they need to do in that environment. But the fundamental approach was born digital. This is what we do. As a company, we take natural gas, we convert that through a 3-step process, syngas reforming, Fischer-Tropsch, and then into product workup, making very sought after products, Group 3 plus base oil. This is the crown jewel. Today in the US, that has been imported. So how do we displace that? So there's a lot of support from the US state on what we do, because it's energy security, but it's also critical products available. Ultra low sulfur diesel that is biodegradable, non-toxic in aquatic environments, and can last for 5 years before. And that is for military applications as well as for the medical and food applications. And then naphtha is used as a diluent. And then the process is exothermic, so we create a lot of water, but also then the heat, and that creates the power. Now that's also giving you the opportunity to integrate that with what you're doing with AI and computing centers. The beauty of the Group 3 plus base oils, it can also be used as immersion cooling liquid that you use in those computing centers. So it's a really good combination. And then we do it with carbon capture and sequestration. And, the whole approach that we're following, and now I'll maybe, talk about the back end, is a plug and play concept. So if there are new technologies development, we can build that in. Using a lot of gas, and this is just a small little video, if I can get it. This is the first project that we do. Already got all our permits, and we can do two of the projects already in the same location. Lots of gas, don't know where to put it, it's stranded. We take away some of the, the flaring, but, quite a nice setup. This is the last slide. What you know, you need to conclude and say, how do I put this together? So we started looking at, you know, the disruptive environment and how this is set up. We then realized that, you know, we cannot grow quick enough in all the different areas. That's why, you know, we went for a partnership model of how we can work with the right partners, you know, to build the future. And that's, you know, why we built into this, you know, the adaptive organization design, but it's centralized, integrated already from day one so that I can adapt. But the integration means that the people in HR knows what the people in procurement is doing, how the people in marketing is reacting to that, and how we can then integrate the facility. Going through a holistic top-down approach by integrating this, so going through about 1,600 business processes, making sure that they align, making sure that it's adaptable, making sure that it's actually delivering the results. And then by having a learning organization, you know, some of the components and some of the work that we're doing, especially with people, is to start seeing, you know, how people have got a fear of change and how do we actually do the change. So taking people through education processes, make sure that they adapt to this whole new world, be open. Create an environment where people can actually make mistakes. Say, you know what, I've tried this, it's not working. Good, but why is it not working? Can we have it a different way? So it takes people normally, you know, between 3 and 6 months before they start understanding that it is a different environment and I need to be able to adapt. I need to take ownership and I need to see how I can bring something different that will address the problem. So solutions focused rather than finger pointing. So one of the biggest changes that we've seen is, you know, not just in, you know, our own people, but also the partners. You know, some of the people working with us, I mean, ABB is one of our partners. You know, they've seen also, and then we sit with the engineering company, how we need to accommodate changes in them and be open of what this whole new world looks like. How do we embrace technologies? And then, you know, by building that in and building the different components, we also have the ability to then say, we've built a beautiful story. We've created the capacity to also look at new technologies. If there's a new carbon capture technology, why don't we incorporate that? But we do it at the right time after we've proven that it's work. And I think, you know, it's a multidimensional approach, but it requires the leadership not try to bog down and go down to the old habits, old structures, old dimensions, because the world is now a multicolor, multidimensional, multi-focused environment. And how do I embrace that? And then part of this was really the centrality of data, the process integration, and then make sure that I understand, you know, how do I adapt, how do I process, have rigorous management of change processes that can filter down top to bottom. And then we replicate this as fast as we can, you know, in the right different environments. That's a bit of our story. That's a bit of, you know, what we're currently doing. It's not been a 2-week exercise, I can tell you that, and it's not been an easy journey. But the beauty that what we create out of this is giving me so much passion about, you know, doing this and bringing this forward. And we've seen, you know, the partners, as they start to understand what we're doing and how we're approaching this, you know, fall, you know, all over, because we enable people to think, we enable people to bring innovation, we enable people to say, I can be part of a success story in a different way. So it's not the same business. But thank you very much. I appreciate the time, and I don't know if there's Andy.